Okay, so what is the fundamental issue here? What did we discuss today? All right, so you're in a frame, and we've laid out its characteristics. It has a goal in it, it has a current position in it, it has rules for operating within it. It governs your perceptions, which is a really critical thing to understand. And while governing your perceptions, it tells you what's useful to you and what gets in your way, but most importantly, it tells you what you don't have to pay attention to. So as long as your damn frame is functional, you can ignore most of the world. And that means your stress level is way lower than it would normally be. Okay, so perception, motivation, all of that's integrated into those frames. And then the emotional element comes out in that when you're within a frame, things that move you forward and validate the frame are positive, and things that get in your way and invalidate the frame are negative. And then the next issue is, well, if your frame is invalidated, exactly what does that mean? And you can't answer that without thinking about the hierarchy of frames, because if you're lucky, it just means your frame needs a minor alteration. That would be equivalent to Piagetian assimilation in some sense, right? You can stay in the frame, you just make a small adjustment. I think the Piagetian distinction between assimilation and accommodation is technically inaccurate because it's a continuum, right? I mean, if I want to grab your pen, I have a little frame that will enable me to do that. You say, well, I'm staying within the frame to move that out of the way, but actually I'm not. What I'm doing is I'm doing a small micro revolution in the frame, moving that to pick that up. And so I think accommodation, there's no hard distinction between assimilation and accommodation, it's a continuum. So you'd say, well, if the top end of your map gets blown out, that requires accommodation. And if it's just a little micro change at the bottom, that's assimilation. But there's no real difference between this except for scale. And there's kind of a continual scale, not an absolute dichotomy. So, okay, so anyways, back to the emotion. Something happens and it isn't what you wanted. What does that mean? Well, it could mean anything. What you do is you start trying to micro adjust the frame at the highest level of resolution, but then you might find that you can't do that, so you have to jump up to the next one. You have to jump up to the next one. You have to jump up to the next one. And each time you do that, the psychophysiological cost increases. So okay, so we talked about the cost end of the spectrum, and then we also talked about the engagement end of the spectrum. And so the idea would be, well, if you're very much engaged, say in, let's go to that again. If you find it very engaging to play with your baby, then you might be doing it in a way that's indicating that you're taking good care of your family, that you're being a good parent, and that you're being a good person all simultaneously. And there's rich meaning in that, and the systems that orient you with regards to meaning are saying, look, you're doing this micro action in a way that benefits the maintenance and maybe even the expansion of all the frames that exist above it. And that's exactly what you want. You want to be doing that all the time if you can. And so that implies that you want to delineate out a pretty well-developed value system so that you're not acting at odds with yourself. And you also want to have that integrated within the broader society so that society isn't existing towards you as a continual obstacle and making your life miserable. So, okay.